All right. I don't like murder. My name is Rita. This is my co-host, Jenny. Hey, Jenny.
Hey, Rita. Super
Hey,
excited to be here.
I am too. Jenny and I are incredible connoisseurs of the crime genre on TV, on networks that run it 24/7. And we have a little bit different take on it because we like to look deeper into cases of kind of like what's happening now and after we look at what happened. So today is our first episode, and the way we're going to run it is each show, each one of us are going to pick a crime that we're interested in and then look at different facets of it. So you ready to go, Jenny?
I'm ready.
Awesome. So today's case is about a woman. Her name is Carol Sue Walker, and she was murdered in her home in 1981. Her husband was convicted of the murder and has been in prison for the last 40 years. And the case is interesting to me personally because it happened in my town when I was very, very young. So speaking of which, Jenny, do you have any cases like that from when you grew up? Does that?
I don't have any from when I grew up, but I did work at a hospital where a nurse murdered a bunch of the residents. So
That would be an interesting case.
yes.
That would be a really interesting case.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting is crime for most of us is on the periphery. So you read it in the paper, you see it on a YouTube podcast now because they're really important maybe. But what's really interesting to me is looking at why we like to watch this, figure it out. And is it because it's still pretty taboo? Of course, it goes against our moral code to kill people, but then the position of the person committing the crime and then the aftermath for the victims and the people around them. So let's get into the case. You ready, Jenny?
Yes, ready.
Yay. So a lot of this it's a pretty intricate case. Very little information so far. What I hope to do, I have the case and all the details of how it was found out, what happened behind it. Then I have the appeals that was filed after the husband was convicted. Then I have the parole board hearings because after this conviction of 25 years to life, the husband, Jeff Walker, was allowed a parole hearing every 4 years. So the dating is, I'm still searching to see, after 2013, there hasn't been anything that I could locate. So I'm going to go to my little small town library, see if there's something on the microfiche. Not sure where, but I'm going to follow up on this case because it's really interesting. And then also kind of a commentary on how things disappear, because it's not part of the media and no one really has stayed attached to it. So hopefully we'll have something interesting. So the case starts with, did you have something, Jenny?
No.
Oh, okay. All good. You're going to hear us say this probably a million times. And probably won't all get edited out, but Jenny and I are learning how to do this together because what we're trying to recreate, honestly, is when we sit and talk without it being recorded about certain cases, about certain things. And so now we're trying to explain it, but we want to bring the audience in. And so this is going to be fun videotape, but when we go live stream, it's going to be awesome. We're going to have people in the chat room saying, what? So getting back to the case. So on the early morning of June 7th, 1981, the police get a call to go to the Walker residence. And when they get there, the officers went into the master bedroom and could see that Carol Sue Walker, known as Susie, was in pretty tough shape. She was unconscious, a lot of blood. And so of course they called the ambulance, rushed her to the hospital. And when she talks to the husband, Jeff Walker, he says, listen, I was out with my wife, my family, and my in-laws. We got home around 10 o'clock at night. I went to bed. Middle of the night, I heard some loud noises. There's someone in the house. I'm getting hit over the head. And then when I come to, I go in and my wife is attacked. So they do all kinds of testing and and they find out, and they look at it and they said, it does look like a burglary. There's things broken. There's substances left on the top of a stereo. So they test that and it tests positive for methamphetamines. So they look like it's a burglary assault. And
Rita,
yes.
so is that area known for drug use back in the 80s?
No. And it's a great question. So I looked up the census that year in this town. And let me tell you, the town is Livermore, California. We're about 60 miles east of San Francisco in a small agriculture town. It looks like any town USA, but the town is known for farms and wine. So, or grape growing, lots and lots of wineries here, huge little valley, but small. And so that at the end of the 80 census, it was about 45,000 people. By 2015, it's about 80,000 people. But at that time, as small town as you could get, near a big city. So, and then I looked at just up-to-date crime statistics for the state of California. Our town's in the top 55 of safe towns out of 229. So in terms of violent crime and property crime, so very quiet. So not known for violent crimes. So, and then here's the thing, and this is in the beginning, what the shock was. The family, of course, and the public was shocked and appalled because the husband, Jeff Walker, was the deacon of the Baptist church. So family held in high regard, and there were 2 children. And so it was the very first thing is like, what kind of terrible thing could happen? And shocking to the system. Again, I was really young, but it made all the news, local news, because in the old days, there's just a daily newspaper. Then it got quiet. And then 2 months later, the husband, Jeff Walker, is arrested. So pretty much the news comes out and says, after a thorough investigation, something's up. Mr. Walker is arrested and within 24 hours is released because the police don't have enough evidence. But here's where it gets interesting and why he got arrested again. So bear with me 1 second. So after he was released, a gentleman named Charles Bell contacts the police department and said that in the 24 hours that Mr. Walker was here, I was a cellmate and he asked me if I could do a murder for hire.
Great place to pick up a murder for hire.
So then that goes to, well, who do you want to murder? And it happens to be his very good friend at the time. And we're going to pause it for a second because I want his first name, but it was his good old friend, and his last name is Olson, Tommy Lee Olson. So come to find out that Mr. Bell says, yep, he wants me to put a hit out on Tommy Lee Olson. So the police officers start kind of trailing Mr. Walker. And then come to find out the day after he's released from the prison or from jail, Jeff Walker is tagged as going in to visit this Mr. Bell, who he wants to murder, Tommy Olson. So Tommy Olson, come to find out, was part and parcel. Well, he gets to the police department and says, well, now that I'm here, let me tell you and clear my soul. So Tommy Olson comes to find out he conspired with Jeff Walker to murder Susie Walker. So I think it was 17 days before the murder, he had been talking to Mr. Olson about, I need to get rid of my wife and I need to do it in this way, and they set it up together.
Very
Tommy,
premeditated.
very premeditated. So Tommy Olson isn't the one, it's Jeff Walker who ends up being the murderer, but Tommy Olson ends up being an accomplice to creating the scene and being part of it. But so when he gets called to the police to say, he tells them, yeah, there's some stuff going on, probably try to get a little bit of immunity if he turns in Jeff Walker, because he was being faced with tons and tons of felonies as all of this came about. So the whole thing was staged. What's interesting, had Jeff Walker not, because he probably wasn't sure if Tommy was going to flip, right?
Right.
And so he was just kind of sealing the deal to say, oh, by the way, my cellmate, my cellie for the day, why don't I just ask him? Amazing. So this is all happening. And of course, us regular people don't know about it because that's all happening behind the scenes with the police department. And so they're able to arrest him again because now they have the testimony and all the details from Tommy Lee Olson. And then Jeff Walker goes to trial because he says, I'm not guilty, because that's what you do to go to trial. Yeah. Then the overwhelming evidence comes in, and Jeff Walker goes on the stand and decides to, he goes on the stand. Oh, and one interesting part of the case is Charles Bell, the cellmate, who told the police, totally refused. This was a big part of the appeal. He totally refused to testify.
That's weird. Why would you call and tell them and then refuse to testify?
Because I don't know, and so again, there's all these is so little information, but I really would like to look at to see why Charles Bell was there. What, he may have just said, I'm going to tip it off. Who knows? Maybe he was an informant. Who knows?
Yeah.
But he refused hard. Because they kept trying, and it became part of the appeals process because they said that Jeff Walker should have been able to face one of his accusers, because of course he denied it. It's just circumstantially to go visit the guy. Not good. But then that also put pressure on Olson to say, yes, it happened and this is how it happened. But then Jeff Walker goes on the stand and he tells, and this is something that he admits to it, and he says why. And his big point that he made was his wife was too perfect, and he didn't want to live that life of perfection, and he couldn't do anything right, and she was so controlling.
Wow,
so
poor guy.
Right. So controlling. So that is the interesting part, because he went on for his appeal to claim battered spouse syndrome because of how much control she had over him, and that was his only option. So of course there was no record of it, no mention of it, and all they really have, the prosecution has, is we got a whole lot of notes here about the 17 days. Everything was fine. So that's what's intriguing to me, is nobody saw that from the outside. The perfect family, deacon of the church, everything is great and good. The only one that kind of saw the dark side in the beginning was Tommy Lee Olson, who was willing to conspire with him. And then of course, his poor wife in the end, while she was sleeping. Yeah. So, and just to mention, and the manner of death was pretty brutal, because he murdered her by taking a very heavy fishing weight and just slamming it up against her head.
That's
right. So when you think of cases where they say so a knife attack is very personal, because it takes a lot to stab somebody, very personal. I'm thinking, what about a freaking 5-pound fishing weight to the skull? I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's
personal. but it's like getting into the psyche of someone, and then it's again revisiting it, looking at the appeals a couple years later. And then what's interesting about someone saying, then he said that the case did not allow the jury to see the nature of the relationship between him and his wife, how the defendant perceived the relationship, the options the defendant believed were available to him to end the relationship, and then the personalities of both him and his wife. And so that, because the judge at the original trial said that doesn't play a part in this because of the evidence that can't come in. So you can't have somebody after someone passes to say this is how she was thinking. You can't do that.
Yeah. Well, and to premeditate something that brutal, that seems more like a crime of passion, that you would just be upset and then beat someone to death with that. To premeditate that is really evil.
And not only that, the detail, right? Make sure you make it look this way. Someone's got to go purchase methamphetamine so you can sprinkle it all over. So setting it up, that's a lot. It's not just saying, I'm going to do it. I'm going to, in the commission of the crime, I'm bringing somebody in.
Yeah.
And then what's with the somebody who says, okay, I'll help you. I mean, and like, this is me making this up. I can imagine him going like, I didn't kill her, but I'm going to be an accomplice to this. And this is going to be a life sentence if I don't jibber jabber, like bare my soul to go, I may have set it up. I may have conspired to make it look a certain way. Yes, I knew he wanted to kill, but that I'm going to do to save my skin. That's my imagination speaking, because in the end, when, especially in the commission of crime, it depends on which state it is, but you're in pretty hot mess for conspiring. We've seen it before in cases where they didn't end up killing the spouse, but the two people got a life sentence because they tried to. So so I can imagine. But what's interesting, and this is what I wanted to share, is so not only the psyche to premeditate, to bring a friend in to help, and then to say, no, here's the true story, which is another interesting point in other cases that we'll talk about, especially when someone is murdered. The person who gets to tell the story at the end is always the murderer. And that's what's really interesting, because they get to say through their attorneys or through media, they always get to tell the story. And so, and because nobody knows. And that's the other part of looking at the impact, because when all you know is there are two small children. Where did they go? They lost both parents right away, right? And then how do you figure that out 40 years later, where there's really very little information on both people at this point, because it wasn't a big media thing, and we just didn't do that 40 years ago. Follow people, right? But it's always interesting to me is that when the person who commits the crime gets to tell their story, which brings the victim in, it's interesting and unnerving, because you feel bad for the victims' families. Because no one will ever really know, but the perpetrator is trying to save their life, so they're going to tell the story that's in the their best light, right? Their best light, right? And so you think, well, the deacon, highly regarded in the church, highly regarded in the town, nobody saw any signs, everything was great. And so when I think of deacon's wife as being perfect, it's kind of living up to the moral code of the church. Not she's so perfect and so controlling behind the scenes, nobody can see it. It's just that doesn't, and so, but so what's always interesting, and this is where the criminal psychology is, that neither one of us are criminal psychologists, but who thinks like this and then says, okay, I'm going on the stand, because we've all heard it's really rare that the defendant doesn't go on the stand because a good attorney can twist him up. But he goes, and so I just want to give you a little taste of what he said. So he admitted that he had over a long period of time deliberated the murder of his wife and had then brutally murdered her. Indeed, he testified as follows. So the question, you had previously considered getting divorced? Yes. And you previously considered leaving her? Yes. And you rejected all of those? And then he answers, at the point I decided it was suicide, I made the decision it was either her or me. And I chose her. And after that, I didn't look back. Wow. On the witness stand. So, question, you thought about it and you decided one of us is going to die and it's not going to be me. And he says, yes, it's true. And you decided your life was more valuable than hers. Yes, I guess it was out of selfish motives. And you killed her for selfish motives. Yes, you killed her because you wanted to live and that meant she had to die. Yes, I wanted my freedom. Yes. You wanted your freedom to do what? I just wanted to be able to do what I wanted to, whatever that might be. Make my own decisions, buy my own clothes, have money in my pocket, go where I wanted to go, when I wanted to go. You decided that not only were you going to murder your wife, but you were going to cover it. Yes, when I decided I was going to do it, I wanted to cover it. Okay, so this goes on and on. It's like, yes, I murdered her. Yes, I didn't want to be controlled, or I wanted to do my own thing. Almost sounds like a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
And once I decided I wasn't going to kill myself, she had to go.
Wow. That's just
so right. And it's so when we look at kind of the mind of someone, we think, okay, well, we know what premeditated is. You planned it. You had seconds. You know, people can do it in seconds, people can do it in weeks. So
yeah.
He plans it. He makes a decision instead of getting a divorce, because they don't even go into that. Because we would say, because
yeah.
So I would think, and I'm not a psychologist, there's a little narcissism going on here.
Seems
and
like
then
it.
that weird thing of only one of us is going to survive here.
Yeah.
So he admits it, and then he so that's part of the appeal, and that's what the appeal judges come back with, is that you admitted it you gave us the timeline, and then but there was nothing substantial to prove that his life wasn't just a regular old life that we all have. Yeah. You know, you're in a marriage and there's no indication. The only indication that this guy could have thought of this was when he went to his friend. I think they make a big deal about saying 17 days. There was once they decided to do it, it was all mapped out over a 17-day period and went through with it completely. So interesting. And then we have the case. This woman passed. She didn't survive very long after. Don't know what happened to her family or the children. He goes to prison. And then of course this is the first leg of it, is the appeals process where you get the details of the case. Mm-hmm. Don't know what happened to Olson. I still have to figure that out. But the next part of it is he got 25 to life. And from 81, let's say 80 but that would have been, he would be, if he had his, but yes, 25 to life. And then, but his parole cases, yes, I think it was 2006. So he got his first parole. So at 25 years, yeah, for whatever reason, he wasn't eligible sooner. Because there's all these rules in prisons where so much time, good behavior, they start knocking time off your sentence. Yeah. Somehow he gets 2006, he gets to parole board, which is immediately denied. And this is what's interesting is about the mind. And so what's just interesting about this whole case is the parole board reserves the right to say just no, because based on the crime itself. And then we think, well, geez, and he's got a whole laundry list in 25 years of all the great things he's done. So he's gotten even a higher education in college. He's never had an infraction against him. He's counseled people just done religious counsel with other inmates. He teaches, he's like a model citizen, model inmate.
Yeah.
And that is why, and that's the reason the parole board says, that's the problem. You were a model citizen and nobody saw it coming. And
Yeah.
and before I read that, I thought, that's so freaking scary. It's almost as if, right? It's like it's so freaking
Yeah.
scary to go, wait, because that's how we think, is that, well, they rehabilitated themselves and, and oh my gosh, he's got double degrees, he's brilliant, he's smart. It's like, no, the problem is we know you know how to live in the world.
Yeah.
But when you go outside of prison, nobody sees it coming. And so it's interesting. And so he's tried 2 different times to try to overturn, saying it's unfair, but it's a really intricate part of kind of like the human psyche to go, I have the ability to murder someone, the closest person to me, the mother of my children.
Yeah.
Because of for reasons. And at the same time, I'm walking on earth like a regular person, intelligent, and could show empathy and kindness to help other people within prison, thinking that's how we get out of jail. And the parole board, which is, because sometimes you hear stories, parole board going, I can't believe you let that guy out of jail.
Yeah.
Because then you hear, it's like, I can't believe it. And then they murdered somebody a day later. The parole board's going, and I'd never considered that to go, oh, do everything right, but you're right. And the commission of the crime, that's freaking scary.
That's scarier than somebody who you suspect would do something.
Right. Because that's, they
Yeah.
used to call it like, so they set things up and people, because we live in the world, because crime is on our periphery, most people's periphery, that we live in a world of, we have statistics. And we go, oh, this town has a higher crime rate. Or, I mean, now, just like you can have apps that tell you what's going on in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And to say, it's like, there was a shooting, or there was this or that. So, but usually you have to go and look for it in most places. Now, there are high crime areas all over. 30 miles from me, in the state of California, the number one or the highest crime percentages, I'm 30 miles away from, worked in for 25 years. So is that, but it's not 100% of the town. It's just that it is what it is. And so people who live right in the middle of these higher crime areas, crimes are in their periphery. They live in that area, but the majority of people don't. So, but we have access to it, but it's this wild thing. And that's why I wanted to do this show with you, is to talk about just kind of the intricacies. So if we know we're going to a bad part of town, so you have to have be a little bit more alert. And because that's how we do it. That's, and then or areas that you're not familiar with, you're on more high alert because you just don't know. And so, but then you just go, here's a nice little small town, nobody's doing anything, everybody's living their life. And then and here's an interesting thing, we can go into the future. When I was trying to find this case, because I couldn't remember all the details, I just remembered the bits and pieces because I was so young. So I remember, I thought it was a pastor, and he ended up being a deacon, but I remember doing a Google search on pastors, crimes, and wives. I did that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a whole show in itself of like, and because I kept thinking, the thing would be a pastor saying, I have so much adoration from the members of my church. There's no reason for me to divorce my wife, with the exception of I have a girlfriend, pretend. But then the mental gymnastics of thinking I have to kill her in order to save my reputation, and then thinking you can get away with it. Okay, so I was shocked and appalled at how many pastor related murdering of wives that there are. And but for that reason, but for the reason of saying, I can't see an option. There's no reason to divorce my wife because there's nothing wrong with her except I want to live a different life.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm going to look worse if I divorce my wife than if I try to murder her and get away with it.
Right. And then just talking about it. So this is putting, an idea into the head, because that's kind of the obvious thing it looks like.
Mhm.
But everyone says, why didn't you just divorce her? All those cases that are watched of the husband killing the wife, or vice versa, the wife killing the husband. Why didn't you just divorce them? Right. Everyone says that.
Right.
And so I think people, obviously 1 and 2 marriages end up divorced. So majority of people divorce.
Yeah.
Before the killing part. So it's really amazing and then I would think, and I'm going to try and get a criminal psychologist on the show to talk to you about some of these cases of what's in the mind of somebody. And that, like I said, the scary part is living life like normal.
Yeah.
And then one day you go, I don't want this life anymore. And this is how I get rid of it.
Yeah.
Because that whole weird childlike thing of, I just want to do what I want to do. In my world, it would just go, this marriage isn't working anymore. But that's why it feels narcissistic to me, because it's like, I want everything. I want my life, but I just don't want her in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the messiness that goes with it, right? Especially when you have children, that's that weird thing of what is it in a person's brain?
Yeah.
That says, that's what,
Yeah, especially the pastors. Like, that's so weird that's a thing.
Right. That's so weird. It's a thing. And so as we go on and talk about other cases of what, how, and where, a lot of the conversations are going to be, which is probably why these shows are, really they're listed under entertainment, which I don't think, I want to try to keep pulling the string on why we need to watch them. And is it because it's a kind of a taboo? Because we don't like murder. That's the big thing. It's part of the human nature. Murder happens. People do it. And then we combine it with our culture that says, okay, we have rules against that, but people, while they still do it, is that kind of getting in the mind of somebody who, and this is what I call a regular cases no one's ever heard of. There's a ton of shows all over YouTube and on TV of more famous cases but the layer that I want to look at is, of course, look at the crime, but then how it really affects. Does it affect a small town? I don't know. I don't think so. I just really think, because I can't look at it and go, we're not like it's like nobody knows about it. And in my town, I'm thinking little town of 50,000 people, and then time goes on 40 years later. And that's the other part of our judicial system is when someone goes away, they do disappear. They could disappear forever. Yeah. And then that's the kind of the cultural impact that the conversations that we can have is, so not everybody should be in jail. And but on the occasion that they are in jail, that's not a political thing. I'm just saying, because I'm in California. There's a lot of people in jail for things that are legal now, and I just don't understand that. That's my political stand, right?
That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, but depending on, because we've had some years of the 3 strikes you're out, California did, and there's still people languishing because so if you were caught selling pot, and then you got caught again, and the 3rd time, it's a life sentence. So you think, so I can't even imagine people that are sitting in jail going, anybody could drive up. You could drive up to a dispensary here. It's all good, right? Yeah. So that's something, and we'll be inviting people in all of the genre, but to really talk to some attorneys to kind of help understand as much as we can, because we'll talk about different cases in different states, and they will be, they may be handled in California different than they're handled in Montana, on and on and on. And so the whole process is exciting. and
Yes.
interesting, but then that's a pull the string to say, while we don't like murder, there's a lot about it psychologically that we're drawn to, maybe because it's just so unbelievable.
Mhm.
And then we're going to just pick through that.
Sounds great.
Yay. All right. So that's our first case. We will bring more to you very soon. Thank you for joining us, Jenny. It's quiet on your side because you know me, jibber jab, but
Yes.
and I've always got something to say.
Next
And
time it's my turn. So
yeah, Jenny will jibber jab and I'll just go. Mhm, mhm. Anyway, have a great afternoon. Thank you
You
so
too.
much for joining us. Bye.
Bye.